All right, welcome back to another episode of the Carter Cast. I'm your host, Carter Bond. With me, as always, Ben, college basketball Final Four preview, Ben. We got to this point. Imagine telling yourself, remember when we were doing those podcasts back at the end of February? We're like, we need conference tournament time. Like, regular season's been a drag. Could you imagine telling yourself then that the NC State Wolfpack are in the Final Four? Like, I've gotten over the Duke loss. I'm back. We're here. You can hear it in my voice that I'm back. But it still is boggling my mind that the NC State Wolfpack are in the Final Four. It still doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it makes no sense to me either. Well, just the fact that it's been a 9-game run is what makes it so insane. And that's a team that, like, it was crazy for me to think of them being in the Final Four up until less than a week ago.
Yep.
Like, even when they made the second weekend, I'm like, they're toast. They're
even
not
when
Marquette, Houston,
even
or
when,
Duke.
like, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Even when they beat Marquette, you're like, okay, and I mean, I'm a pessimistic Duke fan, so I thought NC State was going to win, but even then you're like, they're a 7.5-point underdog against this Duke team. They're probably not pulling this one out.
Yeah, no, it felt like, okay, things have broken open for Duke. Duke's going to get it done.
Yeah.
Duke's not going to lose to them twice.
Yeah.
That's sort of where I came from. But it happened,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, we're here. It's the Final Four. It's NC State versus Purdue. It's UConn versus Alabama. But before we get into the show today, we are brought to you by SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app or go to SeatGeek.com to get $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek today using code CarterCast, KARTERKAST, for $20 off your first purchase. $50 purchase minimum required. Terms and conditions do apply. Download the SeatGeek app or go to SeatGeek.com for your tickets today. Ben, show rundown real quick. We're going to make a case for each team, how they can win the title, talk about their path a little bit, how they've gotten here and whatnot, and then we're going to preview the games. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about Phoenix because we're going down to the Final Four this week. We head down Friday, and that'll be the show today. Let's start off. We're going to make a case for each of these teams. We'll start lowest to highest. Right now, we'll start with the NC State Wolfpack, the 11 seed. They're currently 20-1 to win the NCAA tournament right now. Like we just talked about it just a second ago, it still doesn't make sense how they're here because I'm sure you saw that compilation from that one guy on Twitter. I'm forgetting his name, so sorry whoever made that video. But they made the compilation of Marquette missing all those threes. And watching the Duke game, you saw Duke. They missed so many open shots. And even Oakland took them to overtime. They missed some open shots too. Is it like with this NC State run, this is going to sound sour grapes, but is it more so teams are playing bad and have just not taking their chances when they're given to them, or is it NC State's just playing out of their minds?
I'm going to say both, but I'm going to kind of lean towards it's just sort of been handed to them by other teams a little bit. I hate to say that, but like a little bit is like kind of me trying to be nice a tad, but Virginia either makes those free throws or fouls up 3, they're not in the tournament.
Yep.
Like things like that are what come to mind. Specifically that they were down against Louisville. If they lost to Louisville, if they lost to Syracuse, if they lost to Virginia, maybe even if they lost to North Carolina still, like Kevin Keats is fired.
Yes. Did you see
Duke too. Any of those 5 games.
Shout out Josh Graham. He put out a video of if somebody made a movie of this NC State Final Four run. Kevin Keats was like, "Yeah, I want Denzel Washington to play me." Could you imagine the scene where Boo Corrigan, the NC State athletic director, it's Tuesday night in DC and they're losing at halftime to Louisville, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to be firing Kevin Keats," or like a meeting before the tournament, be like, "Hey man, if you don't win this thing, you're fired." Like that would be the biggest point, not climax of the movie necessarily, but the biggest part of the movie, I feel like.
No, it totally would be. It makes for like they very much have like a team of destiny vibes
100%
around them. But I think it's one of those things. Marquette shot, I think it was 4 for 31 from 3.
Yep.
Duke couldn't hit anything.
What
they shoot from the floor?
So every player not named Jared McCain made 0 3-pointers on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. And they've got some good defenders, but like specifically, Casey Morsell has a Virginia basketball Tony Bennett background for a couple of years, but he wasn't even the best defender on that team. So like he's not like he's a pretty good defender, but like He's nothing crazy. DJ Burns can't defend. Diarra's lengthy. But I think it's a little bit of both. If they've started playing well at the right time, DJ Burns was not this player. Like, I think we both admit that previous to this run. But at the same time, there might be a regression to the mean in regards to other teams and how they shoot the three ball against him.
Yeah, I think so too. But I mean, maybe it's just good State defense. Maybe it's the overinflated balls. I don't know what it is, but credit to them. Make the case on how NC State can win the title.
NC State can win the title by DJ Burns asserting his will early and getting Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan or Grant Nelson, any of the bigs on other teams, in foul trouble. By doing that, that can change the game entirely. Like, imagine a Purdue game where Zach Edey's out pretty quick, and then it's like the pressure's on Braden Smith. Like, I've kind of got to carry this.
Yep.
Like, I got to win this game. Like, Braden Smith, obviously, like, I think he's the best guard on the floor in that case. But, like, Could he get outplayed by DJ Horn? Yeah, he could.
100%.
That can happen. I have concerns about DJ Burns' ability to guard the other bigs in this Final Four. So I think he needs to make a concerted effort of getting those other impact bigs out of the game.
And I think, vice versa to that, I think DJ Burns has to stay out of foul trouble. I think that's the other key here. Mm-hmm. And I really think it just boils down to, it's not great analysis, but I think DJ Horn just kind of has to turn into a Kemba Walker-like star. He's got to just turn it on, and he's got to just play out of his mind, because Casey Morsell, he's a great player. He'll get his. He'll hit those, 12-foot mid-range fadeaway jump shots. DR is a great defender. He's not going to give you a lot on offense, but he can hit the occasional three if you need it. McConnell or O'Connell, whatever his name is, the white kid, he can, he's a fine player, but DJ Horn and DJ Burns are the ones that can take you to that next level. DJ Horn and DJ Burns cannot be non-existent in these games. They have to assert their dominance and assert their dominance early, especially. They're going to be massive underdogs, even if they play Bama, UConn, and right now they're playing Purdue.
Yeah, and I unless, as I was saying, foul trouble, unless there is major foul trouble to Zach Edey, Donovan Clingan, Grant Nelson, it's hard for me to imagine NC State winning games primarily because of DJ Burns. I think it's because a guard, probably DJ Horn, has stepped up and dropped 30, 25 or 30. I think that's, and all three guards are 15 plus.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the path. These matchups are not favoring NC State. Not only because they're lacking talent that other teams in this Final Four have, but the things that they had advantages over other teams up until this point they don't really have that anymore in this Final Four with Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan specifically.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Anything else on NC State, their case to make the title?
No, I think that's really it.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about 4-seed Alabama. Their path, they've had obviously they got a favorable draw getting to play Grand Canyon, but that was almost their, North Carolina was the closest game, but that Grand Canyon game was their worst game by far in this tournament. They clearly overlooked Grand Canyon. They murder Charleston. They get past Grand Canyon. They sneak past North Carolina, and they just went nuclear in the second half against Clemson. I'll make the case for how Alabama can win the title. Mm-hmm. Alabama can win the title if they shoot above 45% from three in both of their games. If they shoot above 45%, nobody's beating this Alabama team.
I was going to say the same thing. It's if Alabama shoots the absolute piss out of the ball.
Yep.
That's what it's been up until this point. I would also add, they've had an improved defense over the final stretch of the season in the tournament, and that needs to continue if they're going to win a national championship. And along with that, Mark, this is very much, as we said last podcast, Mark Sears, this is his team. And they've had a lot of, Grant Nelson hasn't been a consistent top-level performer for them. And they had guys like Pringle and Jaron Stevenson even coming off the bench, or Jaron Stevenson specifically coming off the bench, giving them a lot of contributions. They need those guys around Mark Sears to all be at their best and all contributing consistently, along with that good defense and shooting the ball well. That's a lot of things, but I think that's a recipe for success for Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've got the tough matchups or whatnot, but the volume they shoot at, it's very similar to like BYU. We're BYU fans. It's very similar to BYU, where they shoot so many threes at such a high volume. If you make 45%, the thing is, the other team's going to have to play your style of game, which you're better at, technically. And if it's, I mean, it sounds easy to say, but if they get hot, they can definitely beat this UConn team. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, there's, or Purdue if they play Purdue in the title game, but Alabama does have a legit shot at this thing. I don't want this to be like, oh, Alabama, they're dead, they're dust. I think Alabama does have a legit shot to win the title this year.
I think so too. They certainly can, just because they have such a boom or bust type of like capability in them. But the same degree that they could win this national championship, they could lose by 30 to UConn on Saturday night. So it plays both ways. But that's the risk you take in playing the analytical style of basketball that Nate Oates plays down in Tuscaloosa.
Yep. Let's breeze past these last couple ones because I think the answers are pretty easy here. Purdue, they've blown past everybody in this tournament and snuck, got it done at the very end against Tennessee. They had a scary one, kinda, in that one. Zach Edey with a 40-point performance, dominated them from beginning to end in that game. How can Purdue win the title? I think this one's pretty easy. Zach Edey doesn't get into foul trouble, and the guards are hitting threes.
That's literally exactly what I was going to say. Keep Edey in the game, and the guards show that they've improved since last year, which they have up until this point, but they can't become a shell.
Yeah.
And as long as they do that, Edey stays out of foul trouble, they're good.
And for everyone before the tournament that's kind of a casual college basketball fan, they're like, oh, Purdue's going to lose early, Purdue this, Purdue that. The thing is, the difference in this tournament, Zach Edey's a better player than he was last year, I think, but also Braden Smith, man. Braden Smith, there is a different level of confidence in that kid right now because you watch him play right now. He's so much more calm than he was last year. You saw, obviously, in the FDU game, but even during the regular season when Big Ten teams would put a lot of pressure on him, put pressure on the ball, it's just tough being a freshman point guard in Division I college basketball, especially on an elite team. He looks totally different. He looks like the man. He looks like he looks unbelievable, man. He has been the most important player on this run for Purdue, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, and especially last year, it was very much like Braden Smith and Lawyer, right? Is it Fletcher or Foster? Because there's two lawyers.
Fletcher.
It's Fletcher, right? I keep always confusing that because I think of Foster Lawyer. But yeah, Fletcher Lawyer, they were kind of grouped as like the same. It's like, oh, Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith, right? Braden Smith has separated himself. And that's not because Lawyer hasn't been good. It's because Braden Smith has really elevated his game this year. He's become more assertive rather than just a game manager who's just feeding the ball to Edey the entire time. And they've still got guys like Gillis and whatnot, Trey Kaufman-Renn, like guys who can contribute. But I think a big X factor for them is, does Lance Jones show up in a big way? That's a guy like who makes some big shots. He's kind of like a secondary guard along with Lawyer for Braden Smith. And I think those guys can, if they're all clicking and Edey is doing what he does, they can win the title.
100%. I don't need to add anything more there. Let's go to UConn. This will be the easiest one ever. They've murdered everybody in their path. How can UConn win the title, Ben?
Business as usual. Just status quo, doing the same thing that they've done before. Donovan Clingan takes over games. It's hard to say because they're so good everywhere. 1 through 5, they're so well connected. Is it like what's made Dan Hurley's team special the last couple of years is just a revolutionized offense along with his already like gritty hard-nosed defense. Yep. So do they continue having that balance? I think Klingen's the guy that like makes them unstoppable. Like I think they're vulnerable without him. Samson Johnson's really good too, but Klingen's a top 3 pick in this NBA draft. He plays the way he's played during this run. They will win the title.
Like you said, business as usual. Tristan Newton dishes the ball, gets everyone Even if they have a bad shooting performance, like they've been pretty bad from beyond the arc in this tournament. It doesn't matter. Their defense is so good, which helps their offense so much. Like you said, if Klingon continues to ball out like he has, it almost makes them unstoppable. There's so many cases to be made why they would win the title, which is obvious why they're minus 185 to currently win the title with 2 games remaining. I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right, let's preview let's preview these games real quick. Let's preview them. Let's start off with the first game. It's at 3:00 local time in Arizona. 3:00 local time. Purdue is minus 9.5 against NC State. Over/unders 146 in this game. Where are we going in this one, Ben?
I'm going with Purdue, whatever that number is. I like Purdue by a lot, just because I don't think this NC State team, the things that made them special, the things that made this run special for them, are things that don't work in their favor in this game against Purdue. I think DJ Burns, Middlebrooks, I think any Diarra even a little bit, guys who are going to be guarding Zach Edey, I just don't think they have the guys to guard Zach Edey. And I do think, though, that the sliver of hope for NC State, as we talked about before, was getting Edey in foul trouble in relying on O'Connell, Morcell, and DJ Horn to beat Lance Jones, Fletcher Lawyer, and Braden Smith, which still isn't I'd say that's under a 50% chance if you're taking Edey out of the game that they win. So it just feels like a steep slope. A lot of things have to go right for them to really have a good shot of winning this game. So I think the easy bet or the easy pick here is Purdue winning by 15 points. Frankly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I think it's going to be closer than that. I do. I think State keeps it within single digits, and I think Purdue pulls away at the end. I think State hangs on, and at the end Purdue kind of just puts the knife in and pulls away at the end. Like you mentioned, I think the key for State to winning this game against Purdue is DJ Burns gets Zach Edey into foul trouble early. If he can do that, State can win this game 100%. It's keeping Zach Edey off the floor and then letting DJ Burns go to work and let your guards get hot. That's about it. I mean, that's got to be your game plan going in. I don't think this. I think people are going to be more just shocked if either of these underdogs win. I think it's very likely. I think it's not very likely because they're pretty big underdogs, but I think it's. I'll just say it. I think it's going to happen. I think one of these two underdogs wins this weekend. I'm not going to pick them straight up. Like right now, I think both the favorites are going to win, spoiling the UConn-Alabama game a little bit. But I think State. This isn't hey, State has no chance in hell to win this game. I think State has a legit shot. I think you can get Edey into foul trouble. And if they can just get Zach Edey into space, I think a weird thing all these teams keep doing is they're kind of doing what they want in the first half. I would point to the Gonzaga game. And then all of a sudden in the second half, they get to this weird point where they're like, all right, we're just going to go into Zach Edey. Our guards are going to drive into him, and our guards we're going to go one-on-one with him in the post. It doesn't work. It's not working.
No, it's not.
I just don't you watch especially the Utah State game. That was the worst example of it because early on they're hitting their threes. Obviously that's not sustainable sometimes, but they had great Osaborg who's 6'7", 6'9" even going one-on-one against Edey. That's not going to work. At least DJ Burns has the size. Yes, Edey's super physical, but at least DJ Burns has the physicality to move Edey off of his spot. And I don't think Purdue's gone against a team that has someone that's been able to do that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's sort of the way you do it. You get Edey sort of off balance, which he's not used to being.
Early.
Yeah. Get him off balance. And not only is he scoring for himself, but I think if Edey isn't 100% able to shut down Burns on an island, that guy, it's overcompensating some help from the guards and opening up opportunities for O'Connell, Morcell, DJ Horn to hit perimeter jumpers. Yeah,
does State do you have to just go with a really unorthodox way to play this game because you're also where do we put Diarra if we have Burns on Edey, or where do we put Burns if we put Diarra on Edey?
I think you might see a lot of situations in which Middlebrooks is going to play a lot.
Well,
Like,
because someone's getting into foul trouble. It's Zach Heath.
Yes, someone's getting into foul trouble, but I also think you might want to keep Burns away, and I think you could hide Burns. Like, Purdue likes to at least start with two bigs. Like, I think there's a way in which you can hide DJ Burns on, like, Trey Kaufman-Renn and not have that kill you. As I said, like, this is sort of making the case for NC State and how they can match up in a creative way. I still don't see it. I still, like, think you get a good showing from Purdue's guards. I think just too much has to go right for NC State to win this game.
What helps NC State, though, so much is NC State's playing with no pressure in this game. It's all house money, and all the pressure's on Purdue. So if this game is tight in the second half for some reason, you'd almost be like, I'm going to bet NC State right now here in the second half because Purdue's going to get tight if it's close, because NC State, we saw it against Duke. Even when it was tight in that second half, Duke was playing tight and scared, and NC State, they're sitting there dancing on the court. They're playing so loose and so confident, and I don't think maybe that changes on the bright lights playing in a football stadium in the Final Four, but if it didn't happen in the Elite Eight against Duke or the ACC title game against Carolina, why would they not be loose in this Final Four game against Purdue?
Agreed. And it's one of those opportunities where I think if Purdue were playing Houston in this game, there's not much pressure on Purdue. Like the way that like the way I think of it is that, you know, obviously there's a lot of parallels to this Purdue team and the 2019 Virginia team. Mm-hmm. Like everyone's probably rolling their eyes that I'm mentioning Virginia here. But it was one of those things where Virginia blowing that game after Ty Jerome got his fourth foul against Auburn, like that was going to be an embarrassing another Virginia collapse, even though it was the Final Four, because it was like Michigan State was a good team, Texas Tech was a good team, Auburn was playing good ball, but like especially the way that they were going to collapse or potentially almost collapse in that game was going to get thrown into same old Virginia, even though they made the Final Four. Like that definitely exists with a 1 seed Purdue playing an 11 seed NC State in the Final Four. If Purdue loses this game, like it's not like, oh well they made it, so it's okay. I think that would have happened if they were playing another formidable opponent like Houston or even Marquette. Like, I don't think everyone would be like, oh, they choked it. But if you lose to an 11 seed in the Final Four, that might almost kind of undo the, like, validation that they got by making it in the first place. Do you agree? Does that make sense?
I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, if Purdue loses this game, did they beat the fraud allegations? I would argue no. I
don't think so.
You can't lose as a 10-point favorite and to an 11 seed. You're the second best team in this tournament. You're playing against a team that you're a 10-point favorite against. You should beat handedly. If they lose this game, all the work they've done, the redemption crap, making the Final Four, I think that kind of goes out the window. Maybe that'll just be the immediate reaction, and years from now be like, oh yeah, Purdue made the Final Four, but this would be a huge upset.
Yeah, agreed. And if they were playing like Tennessee, Marquette, Houston in a Final Four setting and lost, I don't think anyone feels that way. But it's like, oh, well, you got matched up with a double-digit seed. Like, you better win. Job's not finished.
Yep.
So they can't have like happy to be there kind of vibes.
Let me ask you like a quick hypothetical real quick. As a neutral fan, like obviously neither of us, I know. I mean, I'm rooting for the state in the Final Four for sure, but as a neutral fan, we don't care about NC State sports necessarily. If you are, let's pretend you're an NC State fan. Put yourself in Raleigh, North Carolina. You love Scotty McCreery and Bojangles. That might just happen regardless, but say you're an NC State fan. Would you rather take this year's Final Four run or an appearance in the Final Four college football playoff?
Did like a Final Four for basketball? Like, does making this make it better? Or did you say national championship?
So let's say
just say it.
Yeah,
again,
let's. I can rephrase it.
Yeah.
So would you rather take this current run they're on right now? You get the ACC tournament in 5 games, 5 days, and the Final Four run. Would you trade that for to make a 4-team college football playoff?
No.
I wouldn't either.
No, because once you made the 4-team playoff, well, because I don't. Part of it is we don't have to get into the college football aspect of this, but that's not happening. You know what I mean? Like that just doesn't happen.
What do you mean?
Seems like NC State just don't make the college football playoff.
we'll get brief college football preview. I think NC State makes the college football playoff next year. I think it might be the year of NC State.
Really? Okay. Well, we can get into that later.
They're good, dude. Grayson McCall, they brought in some dudes. There's a lot of NIL money floating around Raleigh.
Oh, there is.
The football program.
I still think you take this, though, because I think that, like, that football team, like, I'm not sure, like, are you really going to, like, think years in advance of Grayson McCall and, like, in the fact that, like, Doran is, like, your coach? Like, you're going to remember Kevin Keats not getting fired in DJ Burns.
Yeah.
You're always going to remember that.
Boil this down. Just as a college sports fan, would you rather have a college basketball national title or a college football national title?
I'd say college basketball, just because I love both sports, but prefer college basketball.
Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to, because I would take a college basketball national title too, and I think the run is more fun in college basketball. Now it's awesome, you're winning week after week after week in college football, but then the playoff is just 2 games basically. I mean, every game's a playoff in college football,
well, because if you made the college football playoff, like especially if you made like a 14 playoff, you probably maybe only lost once or something. Yeah. I kind of like that my team wins the national championship and they lost like 6 games.
Yep,
like
exactly.
That's part of the fun, you know? Like that's part of what makes it great. So.
Yeah. And there's also no better feeling than when your team makes it to the next weekend and then to the Final Four weekend, and you have that week where you're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever, and you talk yourself into them winning the national title and everything. But yeah, I think I would take a college basketball one too. Real quick, score predictions for NC State Purdue.
Purdue 81, NC State 66.
I'm going to go Purdue 78, NC State 76.
Okay. I would love for you to be right.
Yes.
That's way more fun.
Because I think we get one close game on Saturday, and I think that's the one. Let's go ahead and preview UConn versus Alabama. UConn's minus 12 currently on a lot of sports books. Over under 161.5. Real quick on the betting side of things, OVER, over. That is a blind over. Whatever you think's going to happen in this game, regardless, UConn's going to score 100-plus points and murder Alabama, but Alabama's going to score 70 points minimum in this game. So, therefore, I love the over. But besides the point, the actual game part of it, I think there's 2 results here. I think it's either UConn wins by 20, 25-plus, or Alabama somehow sneaks out a win.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I think it's one of those situations in which you're saying it's going to be over. It's because like Alabama can really score because they can really shoot. That's something that I think, like UConn has a great defense. It's ranked 4th in adjusted defensive efficiency according to KenPom. So, and number 1 in offense. So obviously UConn is elite on both sides of the ball, pretty much. And like I think that makes a huge difference. But I think Alabama, like there's nothing that the number 4 defense in the country can do about a team just chucking up and hitting a bunch of threes. So, like, I think that is the formula to beating UConn, is a team that's going to take a high volume of threes and make, like, a high clip of those three-pointers that they're taking. So, I still think it's a tough road for Alabama to do so, but the path is there. They definitely have, like, an edge. Their strengths play into something that I think can help them. UConn's going to score points. You don't have that good of a defense. They've got the best offense in the country. They're going to score points on you. You just need to be nuclear from three.
Yeah, they have to shoot 45% like we mentioned earlier. They need to shoot 43s in this game, and they need to make near 20 of them.
Agreed.
If they do that, they're going to beat UConn. If you can shoot nearly 50% from 3, you're going to beat anybody in the country at that point. And UConn has lost games this season. Like, yes, they look amazing, and I'm picking UConn in this game, but they've been vulnerable at points, man. Like we saw, I think the most comparable team you could say to Alabama that UConn has played would probably be Creighton, and Creighton won by 20 plus because they went nuclear from 3, and UConn's like, all right, there's just nothing we can do here. That's the game plan. If you're the Alabama coaching staff, you're an Alabama fan, you're watching UConn at Creighton film, and you're like, this is it. This is our chance. This is our key. This is what we have to do. Mark Sears needs to have 30-plus points, and one other dude, whether it's Stevenson, Griffin, or Nelson, needs to go off for 20-plus as well. That can't happen, and then you get Alabama's the perfect team to get Klingon off the floor.
No, they are, because here's the thing. Klingon has got some good agility, but you can stretch him out maybe a little bit, and that makes things easier. So you're hitting a bunch of threes, but then you should be able to have driving lanes. If Grant Nelson has hit multiple threes, Jaron Stevenson has hit multiple threes, and you're bringing Klingon out, and you're bringing everyone out, there's not going to be much help there. So you can get guys like Sears able to, or backdoor cutters in guys like Pringle or Griffin. You can find, I think that opens, it's not just they hit 45% of their threes. They hit 45% of their threes, and that opens everything up.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, they just have to hit a bunch of threes. I keep saying this, it's lame analysis, but that's the bottom line here, man. Alabama hits a bunch of threes, spreads out Klingon, makes him off the floor. It's interesting when we talked about the Carolina versus Alabama game. We were like, okay, Alabama can keep Baycott off the floor. Baycott kind of had a decent game. To be honest, if you look back at that game, I watched the highlights again before we recorded. Baycott had a lot of key silly mistakes where Carolina should have won that game. If you're a Carolina fan, you look back, remember he had that missed dunk when it was 74-72, and he had a couple turnovers where he just lost the ball turning on the post. Those silly things, I don't think they happen twice, and that's why I think UConn can win here. I just think their defense is too good, and I think they're going to force Alabama to play at their pace. Now, if Alabama early on hits threes early and forces a quick tempo, running up the floor, gets Klingon off the court, Alabama can win this game, but I think UConn wins this one. What about you?
Yeah, I think when you were mentioning, I think that's sort of the key to screwing up Klingon is Klingon's a better player than Armando Baycott is.
100%.
I do think Baycott though, I wonder if some of those, the fact that they're playing, well, it's UNC and Bama's pace, but it felt like things got out of control pace wise in that game. They're just going so fast that any sort of real traditional big, even Baycott, even though he's used to running the secondary break, playing that UNC style of offense, you gotta think that some of those were due to just being tired.
Yep.
And making some of those mistakes. So I think maybe you get Klingon tired, but that dude's a good athlete. It's just, yeah, it's tough. I like UConn too. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you mentioned the getting it to an out of control pace. That's the key for Alabama. Actually, is just make this wild. Loyola Marymount run and gun. Just wild running up and down, because it was like a 6-7 minute in that second half, 6-7 minute stretch in that second half against UNC, where you mentioned it was just out of control. Boom, 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 boom. It was like ping pong almost on the basketball court, and Alabama needs to do that. But you're picking UConn in this one, correct?
I'm picking UConn because, as you mentioned, sort of the way that Alabama, their blueprint is watching that Creighton game. But the difference was that Creighton game was at Creighton, UConn was on the road, and I don't love a team that's going to be fully reliant on three-pointers to pull off an upset in a football stadium, in an NFL stadium. It's been said that makes it a lot harder to shoot, especially with the balls from the last couple of years. So I think they do get theirs, but I don't think it's fully enough. UConn, I think the defense, I think what UConn's going to prove is that they can play any type of game. I think Alabama has some success, but the number 4 defense in the country holds up enough, along with the fact that UConn's just going to score at will against Alabama. I've got a score prediction for this one.
Yeah, give me a score prediction for UConn versus Purdue.
UConn, Alabama.
Give me a score. I was thinking, okay. I got the national title on my mind, basically. Give me a score prediction for UConn versus Alabama.
I'll go 110 to 100. I'm gonna say it's an NBA game. It's an NBA game.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I think it's 105-96 UConn.
Okay. Yeah, but I think it's one of those things where it's Kentucky, Alabama, UNC, Alabama, high scoring games. Alabama's going to be like, okay, we're pushing, we're going to score, and UConn's a good defense, but they've got a great offense, and they're going to be like, okay, we can score too, especially on your lame defense. So
Yeah, but I will say this though. Yes, they have a great offense, but if Alabama gets to the point where it's 3s versus 2s, because UConn's shot horribly from 3 in this tournament. They're shooting like 28% from 3 in this tournament.
They would need Cam Spencer to turn on.
Or like
that's
Tassel or something like that. Like
yeah. I was gonna say, because like a guy like Spencer specifically, I feel like he's been a quiet. Oh yeah, that's a big reason why I like UConn here too. Is like, I think we are awaiting. Like, I think it was like, okay, our guards, our shooters haven't been hitting. That was your chance.
Yep.
To get us, America, and like I could see Cam Spencer going 4 for 7 from 3, and that makes a difference.
Does this UConn versus Alabama game feel eerily similar to UConn versus Miami of last year, where Miami's an undersized team a little bit, shoots a lot of 3s, not quite the pace of Alabama, but it feels like this could get ugly very quickly, like the Miami game did.
Yeah, because I think it's one of those things where they can do sort of what they want to do, and UConn's like, we can play this game. We can play that game too. I still think that the best chance is Alabama winning that type of game. But I think it's likely that even if they are playing that kind of game, still able to score on a great UConn defense, that UConn offense is good enough against a very shaky Alabama defense that it won't matter, and UConn wins that game anyway, playing the way Alabama wants to play. So
maybe, but if Alabama shoots 45% from 3, I still think Alabama pulls it out.
Yeah, I'm talking pace.
Oh, pace, yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying Bama hits 23s, you might not be able to live at that, but I think there's a world in which Bama's running up and down the floor, chucking up 3s, hitting a moderate amount, but not exceptional. And UConn's like, we can win this game playing this way still.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, yeah, so we think it's going to be UConn versus Purdue. I'm excited, though. This is a fun Final Four. When you look at the spreads and everything, you're like, oh, this might suck. This Final Four might blow, but I think the games are going to be very entertaining.
I think one of those things, though, is that if the Final Four games do suck, I think the championship game is awesome, or at least it's well anticipated. In like Purdue, like let's say Purdue and UConn just win by 15. Like you're like, that's lame, but it sets up for a really good national title game. Or if you don't have as good of a national title game, like it's probably because one of the teams got upset, and then that makes it super fun. So like, yeah. I think it's a good combination of like, you've got like the two best teams in the country, frankly, a team that's like formidable, like they're a 4 seed, they can hang with them, but they're not quite there.
And then Kevin Keats.
And then a complete Cinderella. So it's like two best teams, another team that's good but not great that made a good run, and then Cinderella. Like, I think it's perfect.
Yeah, I think it's that, but also if we do somehow end up with NC State versus UConn in the title game, the Houston-NC State 83 comparisons are just going to run wild.
Oh, absolutely. And, like, honestly, even if UConn won that game by 25, you'd at least be like, well, NC State beating Purdue was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, if you're an NC State fan, you're like, oh, is this Zach Edey thing Ralph Sampson 2.0, where it's like no one thinks they can beat the Giant, and then all of a sudden they somehow do it, and then they got to play UConn right after?
Yeah.
It would be weird because, like, if you watch the documentaries, you hear people tell you stories about 83 and stuff, and you're like, going into the NC State Houston game, like even Coach K would talk about it, where he's like, oh, NC State had no shot. Jim Valvano said in a speech or whatever, he was like, yeah, my mom took Houston with the points in that game. Like, we would be living that a carbon copy of that, where UConn would be a 14.5-point favorite against NC State.
They would.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
What are you rooting for? Who do you want to win the title? Rooting interest, not looking at it from an analysis point of view. Who do you want to see win it, since we're going to the Final Four? You don't want to see NC State. You hate fun.
No, I'm gonna say NC State.
No, you don't. Don't. That was the most BS answer I've ever heard. You
I
don't
had
want
to think
State.
about it.
You don't want it. You sneaky want Alabama because you don't want UConn winning
No.
at 6. You don't want Purdue pulling up. Then you're rooting for UConn, then aren't you? You're like You're like the college basketball elitist, where you're like, I want the best team to win and to have a great reflection on this season. And then you're like, but then you're like, oh, I know you don't want Purdue winning it because you don't want them doing the Virginia 2.0. You don't want them tarnishing Tony Bennett's legacy.
I think. Yeah, I had to think about it. You're accusing me of things I didn't say.
But you're thinking them. You're thinking them.
No, I'm just thinking all of the scenarios. It's NC State because I don't like Alabama. I don't want a repeat of something that's super obvious. I would usually say Purdue. Like, Purdue beating UConn would be sick if it weren't for the repeating the 16 over the 1 for my personal interest. And I'm over I used to hate NC State like a week ago because of what happened against Virginia at the end of that game.
Oh, but then they beat Duke, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? This NC State team's not so bad.
Exactly. You get it. You get it. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Even though NC State beat Duke, I'm 100% rooting for NC State. Like, I love DJ Burns. I love DJ Horn. The story's incredible. Like, if they somehow pull this off, they upset Purdue and they upset UConn and they end up doing it. I mean, movies will be made. Documentaries will be made. And, like, it's the craziest story. Like, Kevin Keats was 4 minutes away from being fired in Washington, D.C. on a Tuesday. And now he's sitting here 2 games away from cutting down the Nets in Phoenix at the Final Four.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Kevin Keats cutting down the Nets.
Yeah. Go State.
He's a winner.
Kevin Keats is a winner.
Kevin Keats is a winner.
I'm so excited. I want NC State so bad. I did say my betting strategy, bet both underdogs straight up, hope for the best. I think that's the funnest way to do this because, like,
I think that's fun.
Because also, since we don't necessarily have any of our teams in it, then, like, yeah, I'm going to root for the underdog. Why don't you want Bama? Because I kind of feel that in the same way.
It doesn't feel like enough of an underdog. And it's like, I don't want an SEC football school winning.
Oh, because I feel that because you're like, they already have a lot. They already get everything they want.
You have football. Like, I don't need you matching UNC, Duke, UVA basketball. Like, no. Or UConn. Like, no. Purdue. Any of those teams. Like, just stay in football. I like that you have a fun, good basketball team, but I don't want you sniffing a national title.
Yeah.
Stay away.
Yeah. But, yeah, anything else? Anything?
Nope, that's it for me.
Phoenix, you excited?
I'm very excited. I like Phoenix a lot. I just love the state of Arizona. The weather should be great. It'll be a little bit of a pain getting to and from everywhere. But as long as, like, one of our buddies who has a car, fingers crossed, comes, like, it should be a great time.
Yeah.
It'll be good vibes. Phoenix is a good vibe city. So
yeah, I've never been to Arizona. I've only been to the airport, so I'm excited. I've never been to Phoenix. Yeah, I'm excited for warm weather.
It's great.
Yeah, excited to go to Glendale. I'm warning you though. It is so trippy the first time you go into a football stadium for a basketball game. Like, we'll go Friday. We'll go to one of the open practices Friday. Just go see whatever since we're gonna be right there. It is very trippy when you're like you go to the upper bowl and you're like, whoa, like even like in some of the lower bowl seats you're like, dang, dude, this is far.
Yeah. No, I'm anticipating that. Like, that's something that I've always heard about but haven't been able to see for myself, and I'm excited to get that opportunity.
Yeah, but anyhow, all right, thank you so much for listening. Follow us at BDHammond28, at CarterBA, at CarterCast on all social media. That's the Final Four preview. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode. Make sure to use SeatGeek. If you're going to the Final Four, man, tickets are expensive, but hey, $20 off a $400 ticket. It can't hurt, I guess.
No, it doesn't.
But anyhow, that's it from us. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, rate, review. Go to CarterCast.com, and we'll see y'all next time.